the major driver behind the discovery of all these things is the modeling. And Richard and you were doing in the Gestalt groups a lot of modeling of Fritz Perls, Virginia Satir, and later on Milton Erickson.
Milton, Carl Rogers, Eric Byrne,
How did you do that?
Gregory Bateson.
How did you think of, okay, we need to model these guys and we'll extract those qualities? How did you
model is a funny word. Model means whatever you want it to mean. But for us, it starts with copying. You copy. Now, when you can copy and actually do what the other person can do, because you just copy their behaviors, then if you have models, if you have modeling skills like the meta model, like rep systems, like complex equivalences and so forth, then you step back from the behavior, from the copying, and you go, okay, what happened here? What was the language structure? Was this reversed reference? Was this normalizations? How did it work?
Yeah.
And you figure out the structure, then you can generate back into it. Then you can say, okay, well, Virginia is really good at this language structure, this meta-model violation, this complex equivalent, and this major belief, and so forth. So that's a model of Virginia.
Yeah.
No, but that's very different from the model of Fritz. Okay, if you build the behavioral model of Fritz, well, whoa, it's totally different. It doesn't have the same presuppositions, it doesn't have the same language structures, and so forth. So which one of them was right? Well, neither one. They're just different. Okay, they're different patterns. Well, can you put them together? Can you do conjoint and Gestalt at the same time? Of course you can. Right? Are there contradictions? No, they're additive. They help each other. So now you've got con-Gestalt, conjoint Gestalt. Okay, well, what about TA? Well, okay, why not? Pull that in. Okay, now you have what I call a maxi therapy or a super therapy that's bringing in the patterns of a lot of different styles of psychotherapy. One of my jobs, and in fact a book that I've published in Russian but have not published in English yet, is called Disassociated State Therapies, or what's called reality wars. My job on the research team, what I call the NLP team, the research team, was to take all of the DSTs, figure out the patterns of each one, and combine them all. So DST means disassociated state therapies. Okay? Well, most of what we call therapy nowadays are disassociated state therapies. Top dog, underdog, ego, id, aggressive, passive, parent, adult, child, blamer, placator, super reasonable. Those are all parts therapies. Okay? Well, parts therapies all have the same form. They didn't know that. They thought they were different. Well, formally, they're very similar, but some of the forms are better at certain pieces. Like Virginia was very good at separating parts, okay? Because she had a category called blamer, but she put specific behaviors with blamer. Fritz did not put specific behaviors with top dog. So top dog was different in every person. Right? Well, that was fine with him because he didn't care, because he was Kinno, right? So he was very careful about underdog. Underdog had to behave a certain way. So he was very good at sorting Kinno. Had no concept of sorting visual whatsoever. As long as the other part was aggressive, he was happy. Okay?
Yeah.
So then we're going, well, wait a minute. Virginia is very careful about sorting blamer. Blamer has a body posture, blamer has a tone voice, blamer has a gesturing posture, blamer has language characteristics that are very particular. Virginia sorted visual very, very well. Okay? Now, why? Because she was very visual. She wasn't primary visual, she was primary Kinno, but she knew visual very, very well. Been interesting to see who her first husband was, because I think, and we never asked her about that, but it would be very interesting to find out if he wasn't a ripping visual, because she knew blamer very well. Very interesting. All the behaviors she knew exactly, but it wasn't her. Most of the psychotherapists design therapies to fit themselves. Yeah. So Gestalt is a mess because Fritz was a mess. Okay.
And he had preferred way of doing things, and
right.
some clients he
and so he built it in.
Yeah.
He built in his own patterns. That's not bad. That's what everybody does. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now if you have a model and you can go into the personal process or system that Fritz built, then you can take Fritz out of it, and you can bring in rep systems, other meta model violations, and so forth.
So you have more tools, you can do more things with more
modeling tools allow you to recognize patterns and build new structures or new applications of similar patterns.
Yeah. So when John Grinder was invited to come and see what you guys were doing, how did that change the spirit of the practice groups, and what was his big contribution? What
You know, I think, you know, my humble opinion is that NLP is the gift of John Grinder to the world. My opinion, probably Richard's is very different, and John is even different. John is very gracious. John says, and has said overtly, and says in Origins, that as far as he's concerned, it took all three of us to build NLP. But that no two of us would have been built NLP. And he's very gracious about that, and I appreciate that a lot. My opinion is that Richard and I were replaceable. John Grinder was not. John Grinder is the genius behind NLP as far as I'm concerned. Now, that's my opinion. I understand that. And Richard would probably have a very different opinion. And John has a different opinion. But I think John's being gracious. And I appreciate that from him very much. And I appreciate the credit he gives me. Right? And I know he appreciates Richard as well. But I think the truth is very simple. I think without John Grinder, there's no NLP.
And how were those practice groups different when he joined, when he got involved and he extracted
we
the code?
recognized that there were measurable criteria for behavior that nobody else had ever measured. That you could count meta-model violations. That you could write down the structure of language. Well, nobody had done that. Nobody had ever done that in the therapeutic context. One of the huge dilemmas of psychotherapy and psychology since its origin was that there was no way to prove or measure results. It was all subjective. Are you happier? Do you feel better? Right? Now, that's the stupidest questions to ask about whether therapy is effective or not. Because you're not measuring the result of therapy, you're measuring whether the guy likes the therapist or not. It's a rapport measurement. It has nothing to do with an effective measurement. If the guy likes you, he says, oh yeah, the therapist was wonderful and it worked. If he doesn't like you, he said, no, the guy was stupid and it didn't work. You're not measuring result. You're measuring rapport. You know, and we saw that everywhere. So one of the things that was most exciting to us, now are you ready for this? I think this is so cool. You've taken a sample of language and a video of a client. Right, when they come to you with a problem, you can count and measure the calibrations. You can document the negative calibrations, their reactions, and so forth non-verbally, and you can take a sample of the language and you can count the number of meta-model violations that they use when they're discussing a certain problem. Now, 6 months later, therapy's finished. Ask them to talk about the same problem. Measure their language. You can demonstrate the change in their language. You can show. They used to have 6 nominalizations for every 50 words. Now they have 0 nominalizations for the same sample. Now they are talking about the same subject. However, there are no unspecified verbs, there are no reversed references, and there are no nominalizations. Reversed references and nominalizations are the pattern creators that were the source of this problem. They are no longer existent in that person's natural language. Boom. Proof of change. Proof of psychological development. Proof of the fact 6 months later, not a month later, you understand? Yeah. You can create short-term change with rapport. You can create short-term change without really changing the person, depending on the power or the rapport of the counselor. Check that person 6 months later, after they haven't seen that counselor for 5 months. Now ask them about their problem, take a language sample and measure it, and you can prove.
And the proof is in behavior.
The proof is in the language structure, the proof is in the calibrations, the proof is in the behavior, and you can document it. You can show this one and show that one. Do you see the same calibrations when the person uses the same language? No. Bingo. They have a positive calibration now when they talk about this problem. What kind of calibration did they have when they talked about it 6 months ago? Incredibly negative calibration. What language patterns did they use when they had a negative calibration? This and this and this. Do they have the same ones now? No.